instead of like trying to be, suck it up and be the guy who's going to try to figure that out and act like I can make it happen.
Yeah.
I just tried to stick to my strengths and said, I'll be creative and I'll work long hours and do everything I can to make a business work. But the financial piece, like I cannot handle.
Hello and welcome to the Neighborhood Money Podcast, a video podcast where we talk about money, entrepreneurship, and building a life you deserve. If you're new here to the neighborhood, welcome. I am your co-host, Cavan, and that guy across the screen from me is Drew, and we are here each and every week, like I said, to talk about money, helping you grow your financial knowledge, and talking to entrepreneurs each and every week, and hopefully bringing their stories to you to help you in your own journey. Drew, this week we got a great episode. We talked to Ian Scherber, who is a serial entrepreneur and actually the founder and CEO of Duluth Screen Printing up in Duluth, Minnesota, but just a fantastic conversation with him, and he's got such a great story.
It was a great conversation that we had with Ian. It's, for anybody that's maybe around northern Minnesota area, he's from Proctor, which is right next to Duluth, and we actually played him in football, and we kind of talked about that a little bit in our interview. So it's kind of fun being able to talk a little bit about the beginning parts there, but even he went to the same college as me. And when we were there, he was always doing entrepreneurial stuff. He had leather company, t-shirt company. I remember one time I had a little bit bigger beard. He wanted me to even take photo shoot for his leather company and make it seem like more lumberjack-ish. I'm so glad we were able to catch up with him. I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, and he has quite the story.
So we've got that interview and that conversation with Ian. We also will have in this episode our key takeaways from the conversation. We'll dive into our money minute, and then we'll wrap up this episode with our what's going on in our neighborhood. So make sure you stick around for the entire episode and hear what's going on in Drew in my neighborhood.
And for any of you weekly listeners of us, of the Neighborhood Money Podcast, you might have heard in a previous episode that we lost this interview with Ian. Through magic, Cavan was able to work. We were able to get the interview back. The quality might not be as great as it normally is, but the conversation has a quality in it. Maybe not the video, but the conversation definitely has a quality. So I hope you guys can still enjoy this.
Drew, let's check in with Ian. This week in the neighborhood, we are welcoming Ian Scherber, the CEO and founder of the Duluth Screen Printing Company, a screen printing company up in Duluth, Minnesota. Their motto is that they believe that t-shirts are meant to be t-shirts and not rags. Ian, so good to have you in the neighborhood here. How's it going, man?
Awesome, guys. Yeah, thanks so much. It's super fun to hop on something like this with you guys. Drew, good to see you. And Cavan, nice to meet you. I'm happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you guys. Yeah.
We were just chatting a little bit before getting on to the podcast here at the actual recording, and all three of us grew up in northern Minnesota, and we're reliving a little bit about the old football days, and Ian might or might not have gone burnt by Drew.
I have a picture that's actually at my house or my parents' house right now. I was going to bring it on, but maybe I'll put it in the post. We'll see.
Yeah. It's pretty good. You'll slide it in there. It was Duluth Newsreview made me look bad. That's all it was.
Ian, if you didn't know the neighborhood podcast, we don't treat our guests all that great. We're pretty ruthless, as you can tell.
Nice. Good. So that you guys will get that in return if I can. That's good. Sweet.
I found it pretty interesting, your story, just about screen printing in general. It's not something that people typically get into, yet alone even exposed to. Can you take us back to where you really started your journey in the screen printing business? How did you really get into it?
You're completely right. It's not like something you grow up saying, hey, I want to print t-shirts the rest of my life. But it's something that we're around so much, and it's always been a vivid thing for me specifically. But like you said, obviously all of us from northern Minnesota, I went to Proctor High School, and in 2009 I was a freshman, and I was kind of in this weird bubble of needing a job, but also at the same time, like kind of noticed at Proctor High School that there wasn't a lot of merch for the actual students and staff, and like there was some parts missing from having enough apparel for like school spirit in the simplest format. And the way in which I was asking for a job, I ended up working with a local hardware store in town. And at that time, they were just kind of getting into some screen printing, and I struck up a conversation with the owner. I knew nothing about the process, had no idea how it worked or operated. I asked him for a job, and it was basically at the time, what I thought would just be like moving lumber around in the lumber yard or helping them at the hardware store.
Yeah.
And it ended up working out to be printing t-shirts with them, which was really cool. And at that time, I guess I'm 13 years old, and graphic design isn't something that I really know about. Marketing isn't something I know about. Business in general isn't something I know about, but I'm completely like involved in it, dove into it, and got hands-on experience into it. And I started with those guys right away, and we immediately started printing t-shirts. And I kind of have a mouth, and I typically get myself into trouble, like most of us. And long story short, back to football. I was at practice one day, and I remember the coach talking t-shirts. And I think a freshman, just kind of on the bubble of being on the team. And I hear him saying he needs some t-shirts for the Hammer game, which you guys know, it's Proctor versus Hermantown. And he's like, yeah, I remember him saying like, I need a couple hundred t-shirts, blah, blah, blah. And I remember basically like saying like, yeah, I can do that for you. And he was kind of like, what? And he's like, yeah, go get me a quote. And I'm like, yep, no problem. Go home. What's a quote, right? Like, who knows what that is at the time? So Google quote, like I land on some stuff, and I like end up using custom ink, which anybody who's familiar with the printing industry, custom ink is a big dog out there, where you upload an image and basically you can get your shirts printed to you pretty quickly. Those guys have been mainstay in the industry for 15 years. But long story short, I use that as kind of a catalyst to get that order started. And then I, got the approval from the coach, took it to the hardware store owner, and that kind of really started my entrepreneur journey as a hands-on person who was involved with sales, also some of the design work, and then, actually physically making the product. So for me, I was thrown into entrepreneurship, and it took me a long time to realize that I really just loved customer service and problem solving and doing a better job. People are happy. And, I'm sure just like sports, right? Like we can relate back to the competitive edge, and I think a lot of that was translated through business. For me, I feel like I was just lucky enough to know that, in high school, I was a terrible student, and I needed something I could sink my teeth into. And having this business outside of high school really built confidence, and it was super fun. It was something I looked forward to doing every single day. And I was able to make some money, which was really cool. And it inspired me to go to school for business, which I didn't know what it was. I remember when this is where I met you, Drew, but I remember, met you again, I should say, or where we connected again later on. But, I remember getting recruited to go play football at St. John's, and not knowing like what was I going to do at school. And this is, while I'm running, helping assist and run this print shop, not really knowing what my major was going to be. And I think like I was so terrified of college at the time. I think I picked like peace studies, which is hilarious. And then like the recruiter that I met with was like, what's this business you got going on? And I like showed him everything. And he's like, you should do entrepreneurship. Like we have an entrepreneurship studies minor, and it's called eScholar. And I'm like, what is entrepreneurship? And he's like, it's what you're doing. And that's, kind of when stuff started to escalate. And at the time, I think it was like 17 or something. So didn't really know, but ended up heading to St. John's, and I got a global business degree there. I got into the entrepreneurship scholars program, traveled over the world, did business plan competitions, pitch competitions, learned a bunch, launched a different business, continued to build off of that screen printing background. And then when I graduated in 2015, my wife and I moved back to Duluth, and we relaunched the business under my own, obviously, ownership in partnership with my main kind of business partner, who's the financial piece, Luke Invice, and he's currently with IFA. And he's a super smart dude. He's got his hands in a couple things, but he and I struck up an incredible partnership because while I was at school, I knew one thing, and that was I was terrible at finance, and I wouldn't be able to run the business if I didn't have a partner that was super awesome with it. So it's funny being on this podcast, and hopefully I can be the person that says like, find the right person.
Wasn't there another company that you were starting up too that was with leather or canvas or some type of material?
Yeah. So obviously, being from the Duluth area, there's some incredible travel good manufacturers. And while I was like in high school, I really had a passion for, like, I fell into a passion for fashion and like outdoor sustainability and how the world was kind of changing. One thing that I wanted to do as a project, and it's kind of, it's kind of twofold. On one side, the business idea was so I could get a date with my now wife, because she was into sewing and making bags. And then on the other side, it was an idea to like pursue and basically take like,
you slide out.
I still get, we'll get to that in a little bit, I'm sure. Long story short, we launched a business called Never Rest Outfitters. And what we were doing was just taking recycled or reclaimed materials and turning them into products. So like, when a cow, let's say example, runs into barbed wire, right? And on that tanned hide of leather, there's a scar. Red Wing Boots isn't going to put that at the right spot on the boot. So that would just go to a scrap pile. Well, there's nothing wrong with it. If anything, it's got a cool story. So we were taking things like that otherwise would be thrown away and building them into products. And we launched it out of the dorm room. We did a Kickstarter campaign. I think my sophomore year, we raised 15 grand, bought a bunch of stuff, moved in the dorm room. And we were kind of in this weird bubble of like for-profit business on campus. How does that work? Hiring students, having people sew stuff. And what we made was pretty crude and terrible because we didn't know what we were doing, but it led to a lot of other things, which is really cool. And that's a whole other side of the story. And I think we can cover that in this, in the convo today, maybe. But yeah, you're totally right. We launched another business and that ended up morphing into a couple other ones. So,
and at the early ages of the Duluth Screen Printing Company, you guys actually have a pretty good story there. It includes things like late night red-eye drives and potentially a trip that you almost gave up to Europe. Can you tell a little bit about, what those days were like and how you got started?
We launched Never Rest Outfitters. Kickstarter campaign was awesome. 15 grand, making money. And I think by my summer of junior year, we hit like 70 grand in total sales for backpacks, which to me at the time was like, the most amount of money ever. And anybody can relate to that in college. You're like, oh my God, this is my golden ticket. Yeah. I got to drop out.
For sure.
I got to pursue this thing. And Mary, who's, kind of co-founder, seamstress, does all the work, wife, backbone. She's like, yeah, if you drop out, you kind of have no backup plan. And basically it's over, right? So like she was kind of that mediator to make sure I stayed in. And she could kind of see that I was like a little bummed out, right? Because she knew like I was really gung-ho on making this. She did some digging and we were able to figure out that if we did a May and a June term, it would replace going back to school our spring semester for senior year. So basically, we go to school through the summer and then we don't have to come back for the spring semester of our senior year. And with that being said, it was kind of like this weird combination of things started to happen. And that's where like DSP was born and my next phase of entrepreneurship really kicked off on campus at St. John's and St. Ben's. Through the e-scholarship program, historically, they've started, multiple different ventures that then students have ran on campus, coffee shops, like video production companies. One of them was a screen printing business started in, I think, 2008, somewhere in there. When I got to campus, I was employed by them to help them run and operate. Long story short, when the backpack company started to kick off, I had to kind of away and I wasn't really doing a good job with helping with that company. But they had decided at the time by that, let's say May 20th of 2014, going into my senior year in that spring semester, they decided that they wanted to sell the equipment and they needed some buyers. So I did my best to line up a couple of people I knew in the industry to come buy the stuff. And I put a price tag on it. There was going to be a finder's fee that was going to help me with my money to go to Europe, right? So a little bit of money for finding someone. We line up the buyers, and the school, through the process of reorganizing the equipment, the school put everything into a shipping container. And when they did that, they ended up throwing away a lot of valuable items that kind of made the sale worth it. A couple 100 gallons of ink and a bunch of chemicals and a lot of things that were like, very valuable in the transaction. So when that kind of happened, I remember the process kind of unfolding of like, the buyer getting cold feet, and I had a little bit of money from basically marry to go study abroad. Right. And the day that it all kind of unfolded is when the T-Spot was looking to get rid of their equipment. Mary gave me her down deposit to go to Europe and we're going to study abroad. I had my down deposit, and then I was going to meet the T-Spot to sell their equipment, hopefully finder's fee, however that would work. Right.
Yeah.
So I show up there, buyer gets cold feet. I got $4,000 in my pocket. And the next thing I know, I'm calling Mary saying, hey, we're not going to Europe. You have a print shop that you just purchased. And she said, whoa. I'm going to Europe. I can get another loan. I'm going. And if you're on that plane in 30 days, it's done. And that was like the next step for me of just like, holy shit, what the just happened, basically.
Yeah.
And I, bought this equipment. And in the back of my mind, I've always, in high school, I was buying domain names, and maybe we'll get there later, but just buying random stuff fun.
Sure.
But I bought Duluth Screen Printing and a bunch of other things, never knowing if I would ever use it again. And the day that I bought that equipment, I was just going to use it for the backpack company to launch an apparel collection, right? Like, hey, we'll just in-house our t-shirts and make some really cool stuff. And the second that I realized we were I was out of money and I had 30 days to basically launch a business, DSP was born. We moved up to Duluth. We moved all of our equipment for the backpack company to Duluth. We found a nasty warehouse that was filled with sawdust and basically like as bootstrapped as you can get, moved everything up north, got everything back up here, hired one of my best friends from high school, got him up here and had him start to work with us. And we started making inventory for the backpacks. I set up the screen printing stuff so we could print t-shirts. And then Mary and I took off 30 days later, and I was doing sales while we were gone and trying to maintain the business and doing marketing for the backpack company. We went all over Europe, studied. It was awesome. And then when we came back, everything was still there. The place didn't burn down, and we made it financially enough to pay rent and pay the bills and continue to grow both businesses, which is cool.
That's really cool. I think a little bit earlier, you're very entrepreneurial but maybe not necessarily on the finance side of it. While you're running your business now, how did you kind of come to the conclusion that maybe stick with one side and I'll let finances be somewhere else?
Entry-level accounting classes, I took one and it was tough. And I was just like, man, like numbers to me, Excel spreadsheets, it's things you guys might love, but I absolutely hate it. Like, it's just not how my brain works. And instead of like trying to be, suck it up and be the guy who's going to try to figure that out and act like I can make it happen. I just tried to stick to my strengths and said, I'll be creative and I'll work long hours and do everything I can to make a business work, but the financial piece, like I cannot handle. Through some networking, I ran into Luke Invice, and at the time, Luke, I think just had left Ernst & Young, and he CPA, just left Ernst & Young, kind of establishing himself, obviously, as a young entrepreneur. And I think he had just joined, or maybe a couple years in, with IFA, which is the Institute for Athletes out of the cities, and they represent athletes like Adam Thielen and CJ Ham from the Vikes, Harrison Smith, and a bunch of awesome people. And at the time, I got connected to Luke and I just pitched him. I said, hey man, I know you're a Johnny football player. He graduated in 2012, I think. Football player, talked to him and just said, I'm looking for someone to go in on this business with me, help me with cash flow, inject some cash, and run the finances. And we chatted, and it was like a handshake deal in St. John's parking lot in his car. And I think I think the investment was maybe $5,000. Which I think he'd be pretty happy about today, in a lot of ways. And that really built like the foundations and the building blocks for success, because like I say it in a laughing format, but like I have full autonomy, like trust in him to do his thing with finances. And, we've been in business for 40 employees. We haven't missed a payroll. We haven't missed any payments, missed deadlines, anything. And, all that goes to Luke and his ability to obviously do a great job when it comes to being a CFO for a growing small business. But also just trusting someone else to have a good stable business partnership.
Before we get into actually, the business and, now you guys have scaled it to 40 employees, which is very impressive from, your early start of almost missing out on your relationship because you bought this thing,
totally.
You potentially may not make it to Europe and all that stuff. And so you've had a lot of challenges up until this point. So when you got to that point of actually starting up the company, what were some of those early challenges that you faced, outside of what you've already kind of shared here today?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple things. One of the big ones was like the foundation for like why did we want to start the business, right? Like we talked about it. Like not a lot of people get into screen printing. I didn't really like see screen printing as the like, the thing I was going to retire in. I saw it as like a catalyst to do other things. I love entrepreneurship and I love the ability to problem solve. And I knew that at the time in Duluth, there was a lack of customer service. There was a lack of people printing on t-shirts that lasted. I could probably come to your guys' house right now and look in your drawer, and I guaranteed you have a t-shirt that's this thick that you never wear and you never will. And that's one of those things. And that's one of those things that we like said right away, hey, like if we're going to launch this business, let's make sure we're curating t-shirts that last, that people actually want to wear. And that was some hard challenges, just because you come out of the gates young, you're higher priced, you take a longer time, and you're more seen as kind of like a novelty, crafty print shop versus, just a service industry, blue collar print shop. So I think we had some hurdles with that. And I would say building the foundation as to why we wanted to get in business, that was kind of a hurdle. The next one was just being young, like graduating from school and not having people, you're young, people wouldn't believe in you. I remember a very, very funny conversation where, a gal came in and she was super upset because, she wanted the shirts in 5 days and it took 6 days, and I was super apologetic. And, she looked at me in the eye, she's like, can I speak with your manager? And I just did a 360. And I was like, I'm right here. I'm the owner. I'm the manager. I'm the guy. I do everything. I own this thing. And she's like, almost ready to cry, because she felt so bad. And I think that took a while, like just gaining people's respect and being a young entrepreneur, even while I was at school, like being 21, being 20, running a printing business, and people, I remember like getting judged by like large print contractors, right? Like, yeah, you're just kind of too small. Like, we don't want to give you a 4,000 piece order. And it's like, I know I can do it. That young aspect for some reason just kind of played a role in our growth. I use it obviously for a marketing advantage, but it also was a hurdle, an obstacle, because people just didn't think I was as professional or didn't trust me to get the job done.
What advice would you give, to our listeners potentially thinking about entrepreneurship and them being in, their early stages of like being very young, just like you were? What are some tips that you could give them so that they can get started on their entrepreneur journey? I
mean, I was really lucky to find something that I was passionate about where I didn't get sick of it. I think I think there's a stat floating out there where it's like, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and, all the obviously incredible entrepreneurs who've changed the world, like they say something like, if you do it in between the ages of 12 and 16, it's like your best chance, whatever that activity is that you love, at making that a thing. And I think I was just lucky to get involved in something early on that I knew was business. So make sure you love it, make sure you're passionate about it, make sure it keeps you up at night, right? Like just thinking about the idea of making it better. Personally, like I know myself well enough to know, like I need to sink my teeth into someone, whether it's a business partner or, somebody at work that I can just like really, really energize off of and talk to and keep the momentum rolling. So find somebody you love to work with, find a co-captain, find a partner, find somebody you love to do business with, and hopefully find the person that has similar passions, but opposite strengths. That'd be kind of my 2 cents on getting something going. And the other one, don't wait, just start. Just get it going, spend the money, do the thing, order the t-shirts, just try it. Like anybody who delays and drags their feet, like you're only wasting time on the inevitable. So you just got to start.
Use your deposit from a Europe trip.
Yeah. Use your future, hopefully wife's money to almost bankrupt.
Yeah, I love that. And I know you guys really pride yourself over at the Duluth Screen Printing Company around quality. Can you tell us how you went from, basically just college students to growing this business to now 40 employees without sacrificing the quality that you guys provide to your customers?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. And I can answer it in so many different ways. Like the first thing is people, right? Like I think I've been so lucky in just having really, really good people. And I've always kind of believed in whatever you give, you'll get 2x in return. So I've always tried to pay as much as I can without doing anything wrong for the books, and just give as much out to employees, make a great work-life balance, culture, everything, just because I feel like I've always gotten twice back in return. So staffing, we've had incredible people on the team, and I could name, all 40 people and tell you exactly why they've made a difference. And the other one is like trusting in the process of equipment buying and understanding what equipment can do for you from a financial level as well. So measuring your ROI on equipment. For example, like today, Duluth Screen Printing owns the nicest equipment you can possibly print on. And you could probably draw a map in the Midwest, and there's probably maybe one other print shop that has the equivalent setup and efficiency that we have. And what that allows us to do is buy, to a certain extent, you buy quality, right? Like we've bought enough machines and equipment that when something comes off the press, it's at a minimum, let's say you guys are running it and I train it after a week, at a minimum, it should be at a 7 out of 10, which is really valuable. So some of that's removing the human error or the variables that go into making screen printing and art and making it more of a high-end manufacturing service.
So definitely your kind of went into your quality of product to be run, just make sure it's efficient, make sure you got the best products, just keep problem solving.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of guys will, they'll stick with their old equipment and they'll add more labor, right? Or they'll add more equipment and they won't add more labor. Like I read some stat that like 70% of the large manufacturing equipment in the United States sits idle more than it sits operable, which wow. Think about that, like 5 days in a working week and it's only operable 8 hours a day, so like add more staff. If you buy a really expensive machine, right? You don't need 2 of them or 2 okay machines. You need 1 awesome machine and you need staff to run it around the clock. So there's little things like that we've done from an ROI perspective just to maintain that turnaround time, customer service, and quality.
Might be flipping the script here a little bit. Just with, we've been talking about the whole entrepreneurial spirit, but, being part of a financial podcast and personal finance, do you think this, like being an entrepreneur and having business, that affected your at-home and personal finance?
Dude, if I controlled the finances at home. So just like my financial partnership in business, I have a financial partnership with my wife. And this is me, I'm going to speed some stuff up here, but like at St. John's, right? Like I remember getting a knock on the door and it was a senior trying to sell a t-shirt, right? And I was a freshman and I'm like, that's my game. I know how to do that. You're selling that for $30. I got to wear that to get in the, in the party house. I know I can print that and sell it for $20 and I can make a better design. And that led to like a box of cash sitting in my dorm room. And then like me, my wife, Mary, her seeing that and being like, this isn't in a bank account. Like, what do you do? What is up with this? And like, I think we had a joint bank account freshman year and we got married, 5 years later. So financially at home, she controls everything in a great way. And it's an awesome thing to have someone like that has the backbone of financial stability, someone, like you guys that cares more about the fine-tuned numbers, Excel spreadsheets, and is organized. But as far as like how has entrepreneurship impacted me financially in a lot of ways, early on, I think it took me a really long time to get to like stable salary income. Whereas like out of school, right? Like somebody, let's say, goes and works for the Big Four and they work at Ernst & Young or something and they get a salary and a paycheck, and their buddy calls them and says, hey man, like I want you to invest with us and give us $200 a month and we'll slowly grow your portfolio. Like I never had that luxury. Like that $200 was going back into the business or to the next employee. So like all of my funds to a certain extent have just been going back into the business. And I kind of not knowing, but knew that had to be the case. But as we've grown, right, I've really tried to adopt that profit first model. Got to take care of yourself. And I knew there was a time window for that. 3 to 4 years in, if I wasn't able to pay myself anything, it was never going to work. So with that being said, very recently in the last couple of years, I've done a really good job on just making sure financially the business can pay for myself and pay myself well enough where I can plan for retirement or savings and make other financial decisions. But, I'd be lying if I told you guys that, I had everything figured out, because I don't. Every day is a new game, and I got a new business idea that I want to put money into, or, there's a lot of little things there.
So being a bit, I know like a lot of times, a lot of businesses will go into certain debt, and one of the big things is you tend to want to, pay debt off, so then you have extra cash. Do you see that happening a lot in your businesses as trickling over into your home and personal life, where with debt lingering out there, you're trying to pay it off as soon as possible and making minimum payments? Or like, how do you look at debt?
Yeah, I think I could back up a little bit and tell you guys a quick story on like an offshoot of something that happened. So when I got married in 2017 and we built a house, the only way that we could get a loan to build the house is if it was a business, because I'm self-employed. I don't make enough money profit. Like it's like 3 times profit to pay yourself self-employment, right? So like I would need to make 3 times the amount of profit of whatever I pay myself, which any smart tax person knows you probably shouldn't do that. But long story short, the bank wouldn't give me a personal loan or a mortgage. So we had to get creative, and we ended up coming up with a game plan for our house to be a split level, where it's basically a duplex, but it just has a single family home with a rental unit above it. Rental, Park Point is an awesome spot. It's like on the longest freshwater beach in the world on Lake Superior in Duluth. If you've ever been there, it's awesome. Yeah. We found a lot out there, and, pitched the plans to the bank, and we got a small business loan, which is super funny, right? Like, hey, no, we'll never approve you for any type of secure, stable mortgage, but if you want to go and build a house, we'll give you a business loan, which is just hilarious, right? So they give us a loan. Funny. We build the house, and instantly it's kind of cash flowing itself and paying for itself. I bring that up is because obviously, early on, that's a pretty big chunk. Just to make simple math, I think we built it for $300,000. And I still had student debt after leaving St. John's and Marriott. Yeah. And we had a baby, so we had some medical debt. All that stuff started to accumulate post-COVID. And a friend of mine in the real estate market was like, hey, if you want to sell your house, you could get X for it. And, the option was, okay, I can come out ahead, be debt-free, and have, let's say $100,000 in cash sitting around for me to invest into the business or build another home with. So this last spring through COVID, we actually sold our house and did exactly that. Went totally debt free, paid off all of our personal debt, and now we're sitting. I'm sitting in an apartment right now, in a conference room at our apartment building, and talking to you guys, because it's kind of funny because we, built a single family house, and most people would probably be bound to that. It's beautiful. It's on the point. Yeah. It's probably everything anybody would ever want. And we cashed it in, and now we're happier than ever. No stress, no student debt. And it's super cool feeling. And what that's enabled us to do is make more healthier risks on financial investments. Do we put more money back into said business, or, do we buy some Bitcoin and see what happens, right?
Yep. Yeah. So Ian, you sound like you've really built a big team around you, not just in the business world, but also in your home life, with your wife being the CFO that runs your family's finances. But back to the beginning of the Duluth Screen Printing, what are some things that you would have done differently along your journey?
I think that's a really good question for a lot. Most of it relates to, first off, I'll tell you right now, I'm a person who has absolutely no regrets. And I think most entrepreneurs you meet, I don't want to say true cut entrepreneurs, probably different profiles of entrepreneurs, but most of them probably don't have regrets, and they don't have a wink of, they're only optimists, no regrets, and they just roll. But I not really understanding what cash flow can give you on the long run. So instead of asking the bank for 10 grand because we need it to buy, for cash flow, right, to run the business, we should have asked for 100 grand or 150 grand or 200 grand, and just really went a lot bigger, versus that the slow hiccup process of 6 months, 3 months for accessing more financing. Cash flow really capped our growth. So I think hindsight, if we would have had triple the amount of cash flow on day one, we'd probably be 2 years further along of where we are today.
Okay.
And that's just kind of crazy. And the other one is like space. Real estate and finance is something, and like being a business owner that I didn't really understand, but like, you buy a building and that's your property management company, and you start an LLC, and then you own both businesses, you rent the other one. It's a great way to do it. And then you can control your growth, because we've moved 3 times, and each time it's cost us like $150,000 to $200,000 in actual costs of upgrading the next building. And that doesn't include the ROI on being shut down for a week and a half or 2 weeks and not being able to produce products. So, one big thing I wish I would have done early on, especially with the real estate market 5 years ago, I wish I would have bought a building and, leased out what I couldn't afford to rent myself, and then slowly kick those tenants out and paid myself back, and then grown into the space. And that would also have helped in a lot of ways, because like some things we want to do is like we want to run on solar. We want to upgrade the building. We want to have a basketball court inside, maybe a workout room, and we just can't do that stuff at our current place. So,
well, when you get that basketball court built, I'm gonna come over and shoot some hoops. Maybe cross you over if I can.
It'll happen. Like I play basketball like I play football, so let's have some fun.
So we've got one question that we like to ask all of our guests that come on to our show, and that's, through your journey, you obviously were very focused and accomplished. And, primarily that's putting money into the business. But throughout that time, like most people, I'm sure you had some sort of financial vice or some sort of guilty pleasure along the way that you would spend your money on, even if at times it did make you feel guilty. What exactly, along your journey, did you have any type of guilty pleasure?
So I would say very recently, I've never got into the game of golf, right? But like kind of with growing into entrepreneurship and becoming a business owner and wanting to network, it was kind of a natural game to play. And it's super true. Like, you meet awesome people and you meet the decision makers, and where else in the world can you get someone's attention for 4 hours to talk about whatever, right? So golf is a really cool game for that aspect of just meeting people. The pleasure standpoint, it's like, for the life of me, like, where's the next course? What's the trip I'm going on next? How many clubs does a guy actually need? Do we need all the merch and gear? And I think that gets me. And I don't know if it's just a fixation where I throw pools of money, but it's kind of one of those things where you don't even see price tags and you just do it. And that's for sure my vice. So I'm working on it. 2022 will.
All right, Ian. All right. Well, we appreciate it so much, you joining the podcast here today. We absolutely love your story. And if you guys want to check out Duluth Screen Printing Company, they're online. But we do have one final question for you, Ian, and that's, each and every week, Drew and I share with our listeners what's going on in each of our neighborhood. And it's really a way for our listeners to get to know us just a little bit better. But with that being said, what's going on over in your neighborhood? Where can people find more about what you're doing with the Duluth Screen Printing Company and all the good stuff that you've got going on?
Yeah, 2022 is going to be a huge year for us. We're launching an offset, another kind of small launch business out of our portfolio. You're kind of hearing it first. It's going to be called Lightning Fast Tees. We just signed a contract with one of the largest digital printing companies in the world. Which basically what we do right now is, thanks. We print everything. Right now we print everything with ink and we burn screens. It takes a long time. We just bought some machines that basically print it like how you would print a piece of paper, and they're super fast. So we'll be working with like Amazon and a bunch of large retailers. So it's a huge step for us. And 2022 is going to be awesome for that reason. And I got a baby on the way. Just kind of found out a couple months ago. So it's going to be kind of crazy, and
for you guys.
It's new in the neighborhood. Thanks. Yeah. My family's growing, and it will be the second. But the second. But the issue is that I told you guys I sold the single family American dream home, and now I'm stuck in an apartment in this real estate market, and I got a baby coming in a couple months. So I got to get to work on some solution.
Well, after hearing this story, I think you'll find something creative, and you'll find something for sure.
I'm working on it. We don't have enough time to talk about the next thing, do we?
On another episode, that's for sure.
Well, thank you so much for stopping into the neighborhood. We appreciate it so much. We'll link all of your stuff out on our socials, your website and whatnot. Yeah. And best of luck with baby number 2. We've got 2 here in my family, and it's definitely an adjustment, but I wouldn't have it any other way. So thank you again so much for being on the show here today.
Yeah, thanks guys. Happy New Year. Thank you so much.
What a fantastic entrepreneurial journey Ian has gone through and continues to go through. If you think through that conversation, he basically started in high school at a really young age and has continued on his entrepreneurial journey to this day and continues to look forward to grow his business. But, out of that conversation, there was a lot of good stuff to take away. But what would you say is your main takeaway from the conversation with Ian?
One of my main takeaways, I think, is kind of funny. It's, this serial entrepreneur, he's been very successful. He's going to continue to be successful. And then when we ask him things about personal finance or how he relates it to his household, he pretty much says he doesn't like to touch his personal finances. It's his wife that does all the personal finances. And that same, aspect of it went into the business side too, where he didn't want to do much of the finance side. He's a great salesman, great visionary, great entrepreneur, but he didn't want to get stuck in the weeds with finances. So he was able to pretty much build that team or find strengths out of his weaknesses. And I think that was so important. And you don't have to be a huge money man and know everything about money to be a successful entrepreneur or business owner. You can play to your strengths and then hire out or partner with what might be your weaknesses, but are somebody else's strengths.
Totally agree with you. The fact that he has built teams around him in his personal and in his professional life is such a main and key takeaway out of the conversation, because anyone can really apply that to their life, whether they're in business or just in their financial life, whether it's if in your individual personal life, if money is not your thing, build a team around you, whether that's a spouse, a partner, or going out and finding a money coach or a financial advisor or someone that can be on your team to help you succeed. And then you can, rather than trying to grow your weakness, you can really stick to your strengths and really have those people and those relationships around you to hopefully get you to where you want to go. Now, Drew, if I think about what my main takeaway is out of the conversation, I was very impressed with Ian's problem solving skills throughout his entire journey. And I think the main thing, the main key takeaway is the fact that he was able to take calculated risks along the journey. And the main point in his journey that really stuck out to me, which is actually kind of funny, the way that it went through. And so good thing that it kind of ended up the way that it did, is the fact that he went and he spent his Europe trip money. If I'm gonna be real honest, if I think I did that with Hannah, there's a high chance that we probably would not be together. She'd be pretty pissed off at me. But the fact that he was like, hey,
you might be 6 feet under.
Yeah, exactly. But the fact that his deal went through to sell this printing machine, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to buy it, use that money. Then they went off and started their own business. But at that same time, he figured out how to get that money back to go on this trip. And he continued to problem solve to really create this Duluth screen printing business, just from, being in that moment in time, been like, hey, I've got basically a split second to figure out if I want to buy this. He knew that his strengths was in t-shirt printing, screen printing. And he said, he took the risk, he took the calculated risk to really just dive in and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to put myself financially on the line and I'm going to build this thing. And I don't know how it's going to go, but I feel very confident in my skill set to get it to where it needs to go.
Ian is a great problem solver. It was very interesting, and I think just hilarious, is he was talking about maybe not having that much predictable income, so the banks didn't want to give him a mortgage. So instead of just saying, I can't live in a house, I'm not going to be able to do anything, he was found a way to think outside of the box, problem solve. And then next thing you know, there was a house being built on Park Point that he lived in, but it was under an LLC and rented out to the other side. So a bank doesn't want to give you a mortgage, but they'll give you a bunch of money for something on your business side. But he was able to work around that. I think that is just an awesome story and something I wouldn't have thought about myself if I have like the unpredictable income and I wanted to build a house or buy a house. I'd be like, oh, I just don't have any history on it. I don't know what to do.
Drew, I think it's just thinking outside of the box and being creative in situations where maybe the path forward isn't as obvious. And I think Ian really portrayed that, one, that's a huge strength of his. But, if you're in a similar situation, if you're looking to get into entrepreneurship, or even if you have some challenges in your life that might not be as clear cut, just I think a good takeaway out of the conversation is try to be creative and really just start thinking outside of the box and try to make it happen.
What's a price to earnings ratio, or a PE ratio? The PE ratio is showing the value that you might see in one company, or what an investor is willing to pay for that company. The way you calculate this is you divide the current stock price and divide by the earnings per share. You're going to come up with a multiple for this company. And this is pretty much saying, is a company overvalued or undervalued? But for this to actually work, you want to have some type of a benchmark. So a company similar in your industry, or you want to benchmark it against, say, the S&P 500. But there's also a train of thought that the higher the multiple is, the higher potential earnings in the future. So you almost can look at the PE ratio as a future indicator for how the earnings are going to go. And that's a price to earnings ratio.
Drew, it's kind of been a crazy time in the market over the last couple of weeks as we've come down from the highs of the end of the year as markets start to drop. The S&P has corrected over 10%. The Fed just came out this week or last week and talked about, the way that they're going to raise rates in the future. So there's just been a lot of uncertainty. And I'm really curious as for this week's what's going on in your neighborhood. How have you been looking at all of this market movement, all of the market noise since you're a day trader?
Yeah, it's been pretty strange. So throughout, I'd say like the last couple weeks, and then especially yesterday with the Fed coming out. So the Fed's pretty much saying that they're going to eventually be hiking some rates, but for the time being, they're going to be the same. But then there's also going to be potential inflation going forward. And the Fed thinks we still have a very strong economy. It didn't look like the market was extremely happy with what was said. But I would say just these last couple of weeks, there's been just this downturn in the market. And we've been looking for this correction for, I think, a long time, or probably about a year or so coming. But right now, trying to be in some more, I guess not as much day-to-day trades, but more swing trades. There's a few trades that, you try timing the bottoms. So there's a couple of them I'll probably be holding on to for a little bit longer here. But it's that's kind of like the tough thing is, I would say before COVID happened, I was trying to short a lot of stocks and they kept going up. And then right now you try timing the market. And that's why if you're doing day-to-day stuff or doing high margin, it can be really dangerous. And so there's a couple of those swing trades that, I try picking the bottoms on, and you'd have them in the red now, but I'll just have to be holding on to for a little bit longer.
So Drew, a lot of people, they think about day trading as you're trading stocks each and every day. And then people, when they think about long-term investing, it's kind of just buy and hold. But you talk about swing trading. What exactly is swing trading?
Yeah, swing trading is and I do most of my analysis on technical analysis. So there's fundamental and there's technical. So fundamental is going off of like really good earnings and good revenues. Technical is looking at a graph and seeing where it's been over the last year, and then kind of taking in some, news to affect it, to affect those stocks. So a lot of the times, the whole valuations of stocks, I don't really look at a whole lot. I mean, there's big names that I know, but the swing trading is I'll look at a graph and I have a bunch of different indicators, and I can see if what I think is an undervalued company or an overvalued company by a graph. It kind of sounds funny, but if I see like a huge sell-off for really not a reason, and it comes down to like a support level, so a support level is you'll see a price. It's weird because on a graph, you'll see a price constantly hit a certain area.
It's kind of like the bottom of while stocks are dropping. It's kind of like that bottom number that they're dropping to and bouncing off of.
Correct. So you kind of are watching that graph in your lines and saying, all right, is it a really big sell off past that? And then some of the times it's just like a waiting game for me. So if it goes past that support line, I'm trying to say like, all right, is there going to be a correction coming back up? And then sometimes if there's a bounce, I like to get in during that bounce right after that support, because then the stock in theory will continue to go up. So the swing trade is just kind of finding that potentially undervalued or overvalued company, purchasing it, and then saying, okay, over the next time frame, I think it will be coming back up to this price point. At about this price point, I'll sell off the stock. The difference between that and day trading or day-to-day stuff is if you're trading every single day, you're wanting to buy that stock and sell that stock in the same day. A swing trade will be over a period of time. So it's going to say, maybe I want to hold this stock for a month. Maybe it's 3 months. Maybe I'm holding it until it hits the price point that's in my technical analysis.
So do you kind of look at this market correction as a really good buying opportunity for swing trading, or are you still seeing it as, an area of concern where there's still a lot of risk because we don't know how much further the bottom could potentially be?
It's a hard question because I've been so pessimistic on the market. I just been knowing we've been needing a big correction, and for some reason the market just keeps going up and up and up. And so there's so many things I've missed. But now with this downturn, it's definitely a point of I have a lot of alerts set for, so a lot of things that have fallen below my support lines, I now have alerts for when it's getting close back up. And so then those are going to be my alerts that I can say, all right, I think this is having a correction and I would like to go into it. So definitely buying opportunities are coming, but this bottom is tough to find right now. There is a level of support. I like to use the SPY, which follows the S&P 500 every day. And after that Fed talk, there was a little bit of a spike and it dropped down, and about where it dropped to seems to be a level of support. So right now it's kind of a point of unknown for me right now. I don't know where, I don't think anybody knows where it's going, but it's a point I'm really looking at if it's going to be continuing to drop or if we actually have a nice little rebound. When the rebound comes, because it will, there's some nice upside here. Traditional thinking stock market people have really no idea what's going on. The younger people hop on momentum trains, so I have to find a happy balance between.
Right. I mean, that kind of is where the younger retail demographics or population is looking to invest, is hopping on the momentum trains like GME or GameStop or AMC and things like that, or looking into the cryptocurrency space, which is pretty fascinating because you're right. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you're looking at it from like a fundamental standpoint. It's really just what is the next Reddit thread? Which one's going to blow up? Which one's going to potentially pump that people can get in early on? But at that point, at the end of the day, is it just gambling? Who's to say? But it's interesting to hear your take on the current state of the market, Drew, because for me, I'm a long-term investor. So I just dollar cost average. I don't change my investing strategy at all in any type of environment, at least to date. So it's pretty fascinating to hear your thoughts as we see a lot of this turbulence. We see a lot of this uncertainty with the Fed, with high valuations and the correction that we're seeing right now in the market.
Another great week in the neighborhood. We're so glad Ian could join us for the interview. We're even more glad we're able to keep the interview and have it be posted. We hope you guys enjoyed this interview as much as we did. We had a lot of energy coming out of this interview. We've had continued energy coming out of all these future and past interviews. We hope we can continue them. We hope you guys enjoy these interviews. And with that said, we will be seeing you guys next week in the neighborhood.